Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of TRCOA's Behind the Groove. If you're here live, please introduce yourself and ask questions in the chat as we go along. This episode is sponsored by Stinson Recording Studios. Also, if you find this content useful, please like this video, and if you are new, please subscribe to our channel. We make new content every week. Today we are proud to have Ben Kliever.
Today he's going to cover the ins and outs of miking electric guitar.
Ben is the owner of Nebula 88 Studios and one of TRCOA's beginning recording techniques instructors. Without further ado, Ben Kliever.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TRCOA's Behind the Groove seminar. I am Ben Kliever and I'm going to be leading our lesson tonight. Tonight we are going to be talking about electric guitars. I'm going to go over the instrument with you guys, then we're going to look at the amps, and then we're going to look at miking them and what different areas we look at, how the tone can change depending on what we're looking to use it for. We'll also look at DIs, using a DI, because I'm going to get into it, but it's something especially nowadays with like the modern amp sims and extra stuff, you always want to take a DI as long as you have enough space in your session. Obviously, if you have so much stuff in there that unfortunately you're using every track, then you got to do what you got to do in those sessions. But anytime you have a spare channel and you're able to take a DI at the same time as you're doing an amp sim, taking an amp with a microphone, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, do it just in case you need to reamp something later or use an amp sim to change the tone. You may not need it. If you don't need it, you can always just get rid of it, but we'll go into that a little more later. We'll talk about putting pedals in line and like where you put a pedal board and that kind of stuff, and then we'll talk about then we'll do a little bit of tracking and just show you how I do some panning on some guitar parts here. So let me get these guys open. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my guitar over here, and let me make sure I'm live with you guys on YouTube over here so I can see what's going on. So I can see any questions that you guys have as we go along. So please feel free to ask those as we go along, or if you have any with a microphone, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight, do it just in case you need to reamp something later or use an amp sim to change. Okay, now that I'm all set, now I can read y'all's comments as we go across. First thing we're going to start with here tonight is we're going to talk about the electric guitar in general. So I have an electric guitar here. I'm going to unplug it for just one moment, then we'll come back to it. But just so you guys can kind of see, just kind of the overviews of when someone's talking about a guitar. For those of you who are familiar with guitar, this will be a little bit of an overview. For those of you who are not familiar with electric guitar and the parts, this is something that'll just help you understand the instrument a little bit more. So just kind of basic looking over a guitar. When we see a guitar, this is what we call the body down here, this whole area here. We have our neck, and then we have our headstock. So that's our general overview. Up here at the headstock, this is where we have all our tuning pegs, and this is where we actually set the notes to each individual string that we're tuning. Most guitars you'll see are usually 6-string guitars. This happens to be a 7-string guitar, so don't let that throw you off. You may even see 8-string guitars these days, so they're getting pretty crazy with how many strings they are, but it usually is always adding a lower octave, like a lower string, whenever someone is using a extended range guitar is what they'll call these. So up there, like I was saying, up there we have our headstock with our tuners where we do all the tuning. On this one I happen to have, this is where the nut usually is. I actually have a locking nut on this since I have what we call a Floyd Rose system, which allows me to do whammies and extra little like sounds that I can use with these whammy bars. You may have seen those as well. And then as we go down, we have our neck of the guitar, which this is where all the playing actually happens. These individual spaces, these are our frets. So this is the fretboard, is the wood, and the actual like pieces of metal here are the frets and how it's working. And when someone holds a note down, it's actually pushing down behind one of these metal lines, and that's what makes the note. So that's what's going on with that part of the guitar with our fretboard. And then as we go down to the body, we have our pickups, which pickups in electric guitar is what passes all the sound. There is humbuckers and there is single coil. These are humbucking pickups, which means that they're made for distortion, which they won't hum. So like if any of you have ever used a single coil pickup, which great examples of guitars that have single coil pickups are Stratocasters, Telecasters, and so they have a more bright, sparkly, twangy sound. That's why you hear them more commonly with clean guitar. But sometimes when you have single coils and you pop on like a distortion pedal or use like a high gain amp, it can really cause some crazy buzz. Not to get too crazy into that, but they made humbuckers and it's basically two single coils, one wired the opposite way, so they kind of like phase flip each other, and that's why it cancels the hum out. So that is talking about these. This is actually an active pickup in here. You can ask that too about your guitars. So there's active and passive. Almost all guitars are passive pickups. Active pickups actually require a battery to give them power, which you can see I actually have a 9-volt slot back here. And what that does is on these are actually hotter. Like you may hear this term hotter. It means that it is more sensitive, so any little tiny thing that I pick up, it is going to pick it up super clearly. They are very, very clear, and that's why they usually work really well with lower strings, with lower strings, because as you get lower in your frequency range, it can get a little muddier. So something that makes something clearer and be more sensitive is going to make lower notes stand out more. So just something to keep in mind that this is between active and passive, just so if you need to know about that. Down here, this is normally where our bridge is, which most guitars have a stable bridge. Like I said, this one has a Floyd Rose, so I can literally bend this up and down to change the pitch of the note as I'm playing. So that's something specific to these type of guitars and Floyd Roses. Over here is all your knobs. Now, most of your knobs, a lot of guitars will differ depending on what their setup is, but for the most part, you're always going to have at least a volume knob and a tone knob. For example, on this, I have an overall tone knob that goes from bright to dark. And then I have a volume knob individually for each pickup, which I have a volume knob that controls the neck pickup, which is closer to the neck. And then this is the bridge pickup, which is closer to the bridge. You'll always hear that. And I have a volume control specifically for each one of these. And I may be able to, and people have these set at different settings because that's what this selector switch does. When I'm all the way down, it's just picking up this pickup. When I'm in the middle, it's actually activating both pickups. And when I'm at the top, it's activating just this pickup. Again, other guitars can have super specific controls for these selector switches, but for the most, in general, they're usually controlling what pickups are turned on when you're playing your guitar. Usually bridge pickups are crunchier, and when you get closer to the neck, they're usually a little bit smoother. So that's just kind of a general overview. Do passive guitars record better? JG, it's different. So it completely depends on what your goal is. So they're going to be, passive guitars are going to be a little bit smoother. They can still absolutely get bright, crunchy, be absolutely heavy, no problem too. But with this, with the active pickups, as I said, like they're going to be brighter. It's going to be more sensitive, like individual, like picked notes. If you were trying to do something that was like a softer feeling, like pick style, that's like an active pickup might be a little too aggressive for that because it's going to be really, really bright and really, really pointed. But I'm going to show you some stuff we can do with the amp too that'll let you kind of dial that in a little bit more between, like where you can control some of the brightness with the amp. But for the most part, what's really good about those two is they're really, active pickups are really good when you're dealing with distortion because it makes your distortion super clean. It doesn't get muddy. And then anytime you're using down-tuned or extended range guitars, and a active pickup is going to make those notes be so much clearer and stand out and be stronger than being like then sometimes they can get muddy when you're on a passive one. So that's kind of my experience with having both passive and active pickups. I really like passive. I really like active a lot for when I'm doing like big chunky rhythms and very distorted stuff. If I'm doing clean stuff, I want to go to like a very nice, clean, passive, like passive pickup that I like to use for solos and clean pickings and things that I want to feel very smooth. So, and then there's also times like I might choose a single coil if I want to have that spanking kind of sound that goes on there. Now, this is one more thing while we're talking about that. Some guitarists, you'll have them come in, they actually have what we call is a coil tap or a coil splitter. So I can actually, as I was saying earlier, how I have controls over each of my pickups right here, I can actually on this guitar, I can pull these knobs up. You can see I can push them down and up. And when I pull these knobs up, it's actually turning these into single coil pickups. So the sound is going to be thinner and not quite as big and punchy. Okay. I hope You are welcome, JG. Hopefully that answered your question pretty well. So that is the overview of the guitar and how the parts on the guitar work, and just so you're more familiar with the instrument when you get in front of it and get to work with that. So the next thing I'm going to go do is we're going to go into the ISO-A room in here where I have my amp set up with a mic, and now we're going to go talk about the amp, and we're going to get into how, like, all the parts of the amp. Then we'll take a look at pedals and DIs and how we're going to actually mic and set up this guitar, and then we'll do some tracking. So let's go ahead and let's go on into the ISO booth. Okay, so now we are here in the ISO booth where I have my guitar amp. So again, there's different types of guitar amps. This is a solid state guitar amp. It is also a more clean guitar amp. It's not a high gain amp. So there's a dip. I've talked to y'all in the past whenever we were talking about some of looking at actually tracking heavier guitars, and we use what we call is a high gain amp. High gain amps create tons of distortion within the amp. This Sidekick right here by Fender, like almost every Fender amp, the way that they make amps is they make clean amps. So they can break up, but it's not breaking up like a high gain amp. It gets more like a crunch tone than an actual distortion, which crunch is lighter. If I kind of put stuff in a like order of things, it would be like, you know, crunch, overdrive, distortion, and then that's kind of how how the thickness is going on with that. So just main overview when you're looking at a guitar amp, besides the first thing you want to know is just where the speaker's at, and that's going to be the first thing we're going to look at here in just one moment, and then we're going to really dive in and look at the different sounds of the speaker. But the first thing you always want to do is go check out their amp, talk to the guitarist, because he's going to know his gear very well, and ask them about, like, if they have a favorite speaker in their amp, if they have a sound or a spot that they know because they've recorded with it. They're going to know their gear the best because it's the gear they play through all the time. So don't be afraid to ask your artists that you have coming in about their own gear, because hopefully they should be familiar with it. Now, if they come in and they're not familiar with it, then, you know, use your best knowledge at that point to make the best decision for the recording process and session that you're in. But always feel free to lean on your artists too on their gear when they're using that. So now that we're looking at the amp, we do have a few knobs going on up here, and then we'll dive into where everything's set up. So we do have we have volume and master. Now, just kind of a difference that's going on between some of these amps. Like on a high gain amp, you'll have a gain volume and a knob, and a volume knob. So a gain knob on a high gain amp is actually how distorted it's getting, and then the volume is how loud it is. When we're looking at a Fender amp, some of them only have a knob that says volume, and just as you drive the volume up even higher, it's going to start breaking up once you get just really high up in the volume, just because you're pushing the tubes so hard that it starts to give you a little bit of distortion, but it's not going to be distortion like a high gain amp is. So on this, what you really want to do with this amp, I actually have a master as well, which if you do have an overall level and then you have a volume on a Fender amp, the volume is going to be how you're dialing in the tone, how much grit you want in there. So if I wanted it to be relatively clean, I might only dial my volume into 3 right here, but then I have master next to it, and master is just clean level loudness. Whatever you have this setting at and whatever the tone is coming out of this, the master volume knob is simply making it louder of however you've dialed in the volume there. So think of like the volume as a gain knob on this, and then the master as your actual like level of how much loudness is coming out. Now, the next thing is going to be, let me move my knees for a second there. The next thing that we're going to see here is going to be when we're looking at our equalization channels here. So guitar amps they keep it relatively simple, where you have usually a bass, middle, and treble. So you're really handling the lows, the mids, and the highs of how they have their EQ system set up here. So if you need more low end, obviously go to the bass. If you need more of that kind of mid area where you want it to feel fuller, then grab more mids. If you kind of want it to feel thinner, you can drag the mids out. Usually treble is something you want to push a little bit on guitars, because we need the brightness to be able to cut through a lot of everything else that's going on in our mixes. So the treble is usually something I'm pushing a little farther. So like on this example where I'm going to have this set in just to start tonight, I have treble around 7, I have the mids around 4, and I have the bass around 3. In general too, usually when I'm tracking for like an album or for guitar part, I'm not like going crazy on the bass part here, because most of the time you're going to be just straight cutting that out once you go into the mix, because your bass guitar is going to be handling the low end. Your bass guitar and your kick drum are usually going to be handling the low end in your mix, not actually coming from your guitar. And it's all about, when you're mixing those together, having the bass and the guitar work together as one, and that's what makes the whole sound feel very good. Now the next knob that you'll see on majority of almost all guitar amps is a presence knob. And what presence is it makes the sound feel more pointed and feel more present, like more in your face. It's going to make it a little bit brighter, and it's going to feel like that it's pushing it more into your face on the presence knob. So this is something that you want to use a lot if you need guitar solos to cut through, if you need bright, jangly picking to cut through, if your chords are not sharp enough for what you want to do, push the presence more. Now if you want something to be a little bit more smoother, then dial back the presence a little bit, because the presence is going to make it a little more aggressive and a little more bitey, but it's something that helps it seriously cut through your mix. And then lastly, over here is a reverb knob. This can be up to you in the session on what you're trying to do with the reverb knob. In general, when I do guitars, I would like to record them raw, unless like without the reverb, unless it is a setting where we have personally dialed in the reverb for that session, and we know that that's the reverb we want for the song no matter what. Because the thing is, once you record a guitar with the reverb from the amp or from a pedal in it, it's in there. Like, you can't get it out. Like on the other way, if you have it clean, you can change and do a bunch of different reverbs in your mix until it's sounding exactly how you want it. But I'm not going to tell you not to do it in a session, because if you have somebody that comes in that really knows their pedals and really has a great reverb, or you have a great reverb yourself that you love to use on guitars live and you know how to dial it in really well, then absolutely go for that, because being decisive and committing to a sound that sounds really good for the song is actually a good thing to do, and not leaving yourself all these options all the time. Part of it is being decisive and picking, knowing this is what this song needs, we're going with it. But if you're not sure about that, then I would err on the side of not taking reverb and then adding it in your mix and choosing exactly what you want. So that is the general overview of the entire amp. What we're going to talk about now is we're going to look at the speaker that's here on the amp. Let me grab my phone right quick, and I'm going to. Absolutely, JG. It is a. I have a old 90s Fender Champion from back, like, that's a solid state too. It's about 30 years old now, and it still sounds absolutely great. I love playing through it. I'm a big fan of the older Fender amps. I think they all sound great, whether they're tube or solid state. Once you kind of go back like 15 years or so, before then they all sound really good when how they were making their amps back then. Okay, so this may be a little bit difficult to see, but I'm going to move this mic for just 1 second, and I'm going to use this is a great way for you, once you get. Now that we've talked about the amp and we've talked about the guitar, I want to talk about what we're looking for when we're going to be miking our amp. So right here, this is the best way to find the speaker in an amp. Is you can either go, if you have an open back, you can go look back there and literally just see the back of the speaker and know what it is. But still, you want to be able to see from the front, because this is how we're going to know where we're putting our mic. So if you use a flashlight either on your phone or have just a real flashlight and you put it up against the grate of a guitar amp, it makes it very easy to see where all the edges are and be able to see your cone through the grate. So in the center, we have our main cone, the middle cone of our speaker, and then it goes all the way out to the edge. So what we want to do, just sound-wise, just in general, so we know actually, and then once I start playing, we're going to listen to all of these, we're going to listen to several different positions so we can hear what the different mic positions sound like. But when we're right in the middle here, this is going to be the most bright and the most present. It can almost get too bright sometimes if you're dead in the middle, but just so you know, if it's something where you really want to be seriously bright, that's what the middle's doing. As we go towards the edge, though, it's going to get darker and feel a little less present, so it feels a little bit further away, but it's going to be smoother and not quite as pointed. So a really great spot to start is basically where the inner cone and the outer cone meet right here in the middle. If we kind of split that distance like right in between those two. So it's a good spot for me to hear what his amp, or what the player's amp's going to sound like after I've put the mic on. So I'm just really hearing the amp for what the tone is. So, because I'm cutting it between his bright, and the speaker, because the speaker matters. So the speaker is what's really making a lot of these sounds besides the amp too. So this is kind of cutting the bright and the dark at the same time, so it's giving us a kind of nice mid blend there. So then that way we can decide with the song or with the amp if this is too bright or too dark. And if we need it to be brighter, then, you know, we just slide the amp, we just, you know, move the mic a little bit more towards the middle. And then if we wanted to make it a little bit darker, we'd take our mic and we just slide it more towards the edge. And the closer we get to the edge, the darker and that's going to sound. So that would be more, you know, if you're trying to get a dark or lo-fi or non super bright guitar sound. So that is overview of looking at the amp. We have our next step that we're going to go to. Let me open back up YouTube in case y'all are asking anything. Make sure I'm live. There we go. So now, the next thing I want to talk about is a DI box. So I'm going to pick this up and try to get where we can see it. So down here on the ground, I have what is called a DI box, or a direct, or DI stands for direct input. So the reason I mentioned this before in the beginning about always trying to take a DI if you can, because what this allows us to do is to take a pure, clean signal of the guitar that has not run. Yes, sir, JG, absolutely. You always got to keep that in mind, because if you do use effects with your guitar, it's always going to, it's going to be there no matter what. So make sure it's what you want whenever you decide to make that decision, when you stick with it. So I'm using the DI here to split my signal. So you can see I have three ways that can go in here. I have an input that's 1/4 inch, an output that's 1/4 inch, and an output that's XLR. So what this is allowing me to do is I have the guitar, straight from the guitar I'm coming into the input here, which is allowing our clean signal to hit this box. Now from here, there is, the signal can split. So I have another 1/4 inch coming out of the output, which is actually what is plugged into our amp right here. So my guitar is coming into the DI box, then I'm sending the signal back out with this guitar cable into the amp so we can actually hear sound. Now from the other side where I have output, I have the XLR. This XLR is going straight out of the output, straight into my snake right over here. And that snake is going to be set up on a channel inside of Pro Tools. So I'm taking a completely clean signal, so when I'm playing it one time, it's technically taking 2 tracks. So I'm recording the mic that is on the amp, and then I'm taking the exact clean signal that is going into our snake as well. And that allows me to, if I need to do anything post-processing with amp sims, or change a tone, or replace something, or add something to augment what's already there, I can do that. If I don't need it, then I can just hide the track and don't need to use it. But if I don't have it and something was wrong with the other track, then you're having to work with what you got, and sometimes you can put yourself in a bind. So don't be afraid to use one of these. On here, I usually like to keep these on instrument, and I don't really mess with the filters. I keep them flat. If you ever hear a buzzing sound, like there's a ground lift on here that says G and D lift. So if you ever get a buzzing sound from your amp whenever you're using a DI, you can come flip the ground lift, and it should cut that signal out where we're not having that sound. So this first thing we're going to go through, I also do have, let me see what's going. JG is right, he's saying there's a robotic arm. Like Lily, there is some studios that have these robotic arms that are so precise, they can set up exactly to, like, you know, fractions of an inch and decide exactly where they want their mic to go all the time, and they can just program it, and the arm just moves, and then it sets the mic exactly there. It's pretty crazy technology that they have that out there on that kind of front. So now another thing I have down here just to show you, I'm going to bring it into the line here in a minute, but we're going to do clean stuff first. I just have a single pedal. I didn't bring my giant pedal board for this because it all serves the same purpose. If it's 1 pedal or 20 pedals, it doesn't matter. So this would be something that you put in there when you are using an effect. If you need distortion, or you're using some type of delay or chorus or tremolo or any kind of effect that's going through on those. And we'll put this in the line. Anytime we're using a pedal board though, what you have to do is, especially if you're trying to take a DI, the DI still has to come first before the pedal. Normally when you're using a pedal, it goes guitar the guitar straight into the input of the pedal, straight out of the pedal into your guitar amp. That's normally how our signal flow is. But if we want to take a DI as well, we got to go from guitar into the DI, then come out of the DI into the pedal, out of the pedal into our amp. So that way we're keeping the signal that is coming from our guitar into the DI box that's split straight into our signal clean the whole time, even though we may have affected or distorted other channels that are going through the amp. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Anytime you have a DI, it's always got to be the next thing right out of the guitar if you want to have a DI be clean. It has to be guitar plugged into DI, and then it can go to amp if you're using no effects. If you are using effects, go amp, DI, into pedal board or pedals, and then into your amp from there. So, all right. Now, sure, JG's asking about passive and active DI. So this one I actually have here is a passive DI. I chose that because it's still, I just really like the Whirlwind boxes. There are active DIs that when you are using an active DI, you have to send phantom power to it. So there's actually a little more power coming from those DIs, and they're a little boosted up. Now, just on those, and those sound great. Sometimes you can get a little bit of ground noise issues because you are sending extra power in there. So just be cognizant of that. Some rules I have, there's not really rules to go against on these things, but sometimes like you can ask about passive pickups, and if someone has a passive pickup, you can go with a more active DI, and it's going to make that DI signal be a little bit stronger. Or if you have active pickups, you're already sending a very strong signal, and you can go through a passive DI box. But one way or the other, both the DI boxes will do the same, do the job that you're doing in the end. You can decide for yourself which you like using when you decide to use active and passive. I would recommend any of y'all there in the studio up here, come up here and just plug both of them in, play the exact same part, and then listen to what the two differences are, and that's going to be the easiest way for us to do that. But that's the difference. They still serve the same function, just one requires phantom power to give it a little extra boost than what a passive one has. So that is those between active and passive DIs. So let me go back into the control room now, and then we'll take a look at getting signal coming from this, and then we'll listen to some different mic choices. We're going to start right here. Let me make sure my mic's where I want it to be, and it is good. So I have it starting at the split point. Okay. Let's go over here. So we're looking at our 57. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. Let me get all my stuff out here. I like to have all this stuff in Pro Tools, my expanded transport, all my MIDI controls, my transport, my synchronization. I like to see all this information right up here. Remember, you can see this information with Command 1 on the number pad if you do want to have a floating transport. I'm just not a person who likes pop-ups, so I like all my stuff to just be seated up there. So it's not something that's flying around in my way. So, okay, let me dial in this guitar right quick. So let's start with the SM57 here. And just so you guys know, I am patching from the ISO A booth into, I'm using the Heritage HA73s, which are Neve 1073 clones. So I'm using Heritage 1. The top one is going to be used for the mic, and then the bottom one is going to be used for the DI. So let me go ahead and get on my guitar here, and let's get a little signal going through. So like I said, the first mic placement that I currently have right now is on the mic I currently have right now is on the split cone, where I have it split between the center cone and the main large outside cone. So I'm getting kind of the middle frequency of I'm getting kind of the overview of all the sound there. Oh, I need to hear just a little bit in here. Let me get over here so I can make sure I'm getting full. Okay, let me pull this cable a little bit. Okay. That's a little more grit than I want to get out of that part. Cool. I'm just going to check my tuning right quick. So just for those of y'all who don't know, there's actually a tuner built right in here. You can use your search and you can just write in tune. This is what's built into Pro Tools. And then this opens this up, and then we got a tuner sitting on that. And if you notice on the screen, if you see the little number under, it's giving you over here to the right is showing what note that string is. And then that little number below it, when it's on 0 cents, that means we're right on the dot. And some of you may be noticing I'm not turning the tuning heads, and that is a bonus of having that is one of the things that you have very dialed in knobs at the end down here for Floyd Roses that you can really they call them fine tuners. You basically tune it super close up here, then I latch this down and screw these bolts into the top of my guitar, and then I can control all my tuning down here. For those of you who aren't familiar with Floyd Roses. Cool, that will work. So let me get that out of here. So now that we got our mid-tone there and we're in tune, cool. Okay, so now I'm gonna set my DI. We're gonna take a listen to that right quick, because this is gonna be a lot just more straightforward on its sound. Like now DIs are going to be very jumpy, so just kind of keep that in mind. Hold up 1 second. Let me go check one thing on there right quick. Just want to see something, because it sounds... I want to make sure I'm coming out of my outputs into the right ones, and I am. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the DI right quick. And so this is just going to be my straight what is coming from my guitar through the DI. You can hear how it's very, it's kind of muddy, you know, there's not really, because there's no EQ on it, it's just like the full tone coming through. So you can kind of see where I'm getting that right there. Making sure, I just want to make sure I'm getting a good healthy signal anywhere between that -12 to -18. I mean, honestly, as long as I'm not clipping on a lot of this stuff, I'm not super worried about it, because I'm always, because you're going to have to do leveling later anyway whenever you're doing mixing, but yep, strobe tuners are super accurate. That's what luthiers use, like all the luthiers are people who work on guitars, fix guitars, build guitars. That is what they do, and that is the tuner of choice by luthiers, is the strobe guitar, because it is so accurate to like the fractions of a cent. It's really, that's what the big thing is on that. So now let me take a listen to. So usually in this scenario, once I have the DI, I'll still track it, but I usually don't listen to it in the mix whenever I'm tracking. I usually just turn it down, because you'll see, like if you want to hear, anytime I'm tracking, I always am using what we call pre-fader metering, which always lets me see how much I'm tracking, like what is actually going on in my, no matter what, I'm seeing how hard the preamp is hitting right here into Pro Tools. So I'm gonna do a quick record here. I'm gonna play the same kind of parts, and we're going to listen to 3 different mic areas, so y'all can listen to what these different areas sound like and where they're going to, and what the different sounds is. See, whenever you're going to a project, if it's something that needs to be sounding more lo-fi and not bright at all, or something that's very bright that you need to cut through, and this will all help with that front. So this is gonna be I'm going to call this split cone. I have my markers up here just so it makes it really easy to see. I like to color code them. If y'all want to do that, you can go into Pro Tools Preferences, and the very first thing on display under color coding is always display marker colors, and I'm going to check that. So now you see it does a color, so now when I go play the next thing, you will you'll be able to actually see the color change and see the sections very easily. So I'm just going to go ahead and play a little section here. So here we go. Ooh, didn't want the click on right now. So let me turn that back off. Let's try it again. Cool, so now I got a split tone section right there. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna move on and make another marker, and then we're gonna do straight center cone. Some of these are more extreme than I may normally go, but I want you to be able to hear the difference of these mic locations. So now that we're back in here, I'm going to move this straight to the center of the cone, so I'm just sliding that over where it's pointed dead center on the cone. So I'm going to expect this to be very, very bright and pointed, almost probably to the point of where it's too much, but there might be times where you really, really need something to extremely cut through that's really, really bright. So this would be the area to go for if that's the need you have. Strap got locked up on me. 1 second. Playing and doing everything can be a little difficult sometimes. Okay, so now let's take a quick listen to what's going on with this. So it's definitely really bright on the high end, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing, but now we're just looking at the center cone. And so there's a little wah tremolo, something you can do with whammy bars. All right, and then we're gonna do the far edge so y'all can hear how dark that can get. Now, obviously, anytime you're trying to dial this in for an exact thing, I mean, you wanna move this, you can move these about 1 inch at a time as you just slowly move around to get the exact sound that you're looking for. But I wanted to show you the extremes of everywhere so you can hear what I'm going, so you can get all those tones. So, let me grab my flashlight so I can see. That's always a key, is to make sure as you can see exactly where you're trying to make your miking position be. So, and the phone is freaking out this amp pretty good as I get close to it. Okay, so y'all can see now I'm pretty far out to the edge instead of the center. So this is gonna give us a darker, less present sound. Let's take a quick listen to that. Which is why the kind of when you're wanting the smoother sound or a little more like rhythm thing that might be not as bright or jangly, moving away from the center cone may be what you want. So just keep that in mind. We're gonna do a little recording on the far edge here. Okay, and we can see that that's a little more controlled. So let's do a little quick listening test of what's going on here. I'm gonna move this marker where it's very close to here, so like right second I switch to these, it'll automatically start playing the other parts, just so we can immediately hear differences of what we're looking at here. And since I am using my markers up here, we can open that window with Command 5. And now you can see I have all my memory locations, and you'll see like anytime I click on these, it just jumps straight to that location. You can actually reach these on your number pad by pressing dot, the number, and then dot again. So if I do dot 2 dot, you can see it jumps dot 1 dot, dot 3 dot, and then it'll jump really quickly around my session. So let's start with the split cone, where we're just kind of listening to where the amp was at the time that we started. Then in the center cone, just very, very bright. And then here's our far edge. We can hear, I mean, it just takes off the entire like top end almost. And you can hear how the split cone is kind of a combo of those. We got a little bit of the dark, but still really bright. Then the very bright and very cutty, like it's not like super full, but it's very bright on that. And we have no settings different on anything that we're doing on these. It just happens to be where the microphone is at and what the sound is on those. And right now we're currently not listening to the DI. We were just listening to the amp because I just wanted y'all to hear that. But then, you know, if we do listen to our DI, it's just going to be completely like nothing there. See, like it's all going to sound exactly the same. It's just a DI. There's nothing happening besides what's coming out of the guitar. But you can hear there's a lot more just EQ and grit going on in these guitars that we're looking at right here from the actual amps and the mics. Yes. Now that is honestly what JG just brought up here. He put a note here is that you will need to experiment with a 2-mic setup, ribbon mic, and a 57 at some point. That honestly is my favorite combo. I wanted tonight to be a little more based on just looking at micing, because I know some of y'all are newer that are watching tonight, so I wanted to make sure you even out the gate when you're doing your first recordings, you're ready to go. But I mean, my favorite combo is a 57 and a ribbon mic. Like usually a 121, they just sound great. A 57 mic, you can even kind of hear it here. A 57 mic is technically already brighter and grittier. Like it's just how the microphone is designed and its EQ curve, it already has that kind of built into it. A ribbon mic is going to be a little bit darker, but it's going to be clearer, it's going to be fuller. So when you get this kind of combo of the dark, clear, and full sound of a ribbon, and then you got this brighter, kind of more cutting sound of the 57, when you blend them together, you get a really pleasing guitar sound, which again, you can kind of experiment with that. Personally, like some of my favorite things to do when I'm not trying to make it be just insanely bright, I like to have the ribbon more on the inside, closer to the center cone, and then I like to have the 57 next to it. Probably here in the future, we'll do a session where we look at doing stereo miking like he's talking about right here. And the big thing on those, but why I would say, and make sure if you are going to use 2 mics that you are very aware of phase, because anytime you have more than 1 mic on an object, you have to be worried about phase. And what phase is the time that the sound is reaching each microphone. So the big thing with guitars and making them sound punchy is making sure that all of them are tight and time aligned, and that's what makes guitars sound punchy and like in your face. If you have two mics that are on there and one mic's off time from the other one and it's hitting like 15 milliseconds later, it's not going to be as punchy, and it's actually going to sound like a weaker guitar sound. So you want to make sure that that you keep that in mind if you are going to be doing double. If you are going to be, nah, you're good, man. Actually, I'm glad you bring it up. I like you're bringing up things that everyone needs to know that just wasn't part of that's just the next step in going on here. But that is but what you're saying, that is my favorite style of usually setting up if I'm trying to get a super thick guitar sound. Because if it's something where you're really just wanting like in this scenario, like one of the things where you might use one mic like we're doing right there is like, I mean, there's a lot of times if I have an acoustic track that's fully built up, but it's like a full production, you know, I'll have a single electric guitar doing just big open kind of chord strums behind it, and it fills up the sound, and it's kind of sitting there, but I'm usually not spreading those out. It's kind of something that's mono that's sitting back there. So everything's always going to be towards your whatever the session and that current song needs. If you're so just always go into every session or any recording process that you're doing with what is the end goal of what am I trying to accomplish by setting up this mic or this mic. And if you're just setting something up just to set it up, that's great too. But if you're in a session and you don't have time to be just experimenting with stuff sometimes, you know, think about what the best choice is for what you're doing and then capture it that way. So, oh, you're good, JG. No worries, man. Keep typing anytime. I'm happy when y'all interact with me here. So I'm completely cool with that, man. So no worries at all. Right quick, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go just put this pedal in here, and I'm going to show you why we want to put and so if we just how you would run if someone had a pedal board. I'm going to do split cone with distortion just so y'all can hear this. It's going to be a little crazier, but I just want y'all to see what I'm looking, how you would set this up if you have a pedal board coming in and you want to make sure you get the DI too. Okay, so let me get this back over to where I am split cone. So I'm splitting right between those cones right there, which is what I want to do. So now, like I was saying, since we want to, I'll get these in the frame over here so we can see what's going on. Now, instead of taking this output right here straight from the DI, I'm going to switch these and let me turn that mic amp off right quick so we don't hear that again. So now I'm going to go from the output of my DI box, and then that's going to go into the input of my pedal or pedal board. So again, this is where you really want to ask your guitarist, hey, because some people will come in with some crazy pedal boards and be like, where's the input on your pedal board? This is where you need to go from the DIs into the input of that pedal board, whichever the front pedal is, or just into the input of a single pedal. Then after that, once I've taken the output from the DI and go into the pedal, I'm going to go out of the pedal and into the amplifier. Now we can hear this is going to add some more grit and distortion on there, and it's going to bring some noise into it. But this is what distortion does to amps. So don't be too worried about that. It's just what it does. Whenever you're playing, you won't even notice the buzz, but it will, like, even though you're kind of sitting here like, oh man, that kind of sounds like it's got some buzzing noise going on there. That's going to happen with distortion and with pedals and with amps. Now you want to try to get it out as much as you can. We don't want it to be like super noise, like where it's just making terrible noise. But you'll see when I start playing through this with this pedal, that then you won't hear the buzz when I'm actually playing. So then you just cut out all the parts where no one's playing whenever that happens before they're so. Now I'm just going to show you this. We're just going to do a little track real quick with the distortion pedal in here. I just want to see how loud it is right quick because I just plugged it in, so I want to make sure that we're good. Cool. All right, so we're just gonna do a quick split cone with distortion here. Let me turn my DI back down. Actually, I wanna look at my DI right quick though too. Because I just want to make sure it's not, because sometimes, especially when you're doing palm mutes, DIs can get really. Okay, cool, so I got that there. So let's just do a little quick pass on this stuff. Cool. So now we don't have to hear that now. But now this is where you're really going to see the difference though too, because the DI just shows you exactly like how my attack is going on. So you can see even here, like from a place where I'm strumming chords, it's a lot smoother to doing palm mutes. You can see how many more transients I have going on here, which transients are all these little cuts, all these little notches that are going on there. So you just get a little bit of distortion action from that. But still, the thing is I wanted to show you is like when you go through that, it's changed our tone, but still, as long as I have the DI out front, that is very true as well. So like there's plenty of times that the pedal can be causing the noise that's in there. So there's lots of times like sometimes you just can't use the pedal, or you have to pull the pedal out of the pedal board. So like if there's noise, and so like this is I'm glad JG brought this up, because there's times where you will go through, like you'll plug in their amp and they'll sit there and their amp's like, oh man, my amp's usually normally clean. They get here, they plug up all their pedals and they go into start playing. They're like, oh, what's this buzz? I don't know this buzz. You'll hear people say this all the time, and sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But the best way to test it is to have them unplug their guitar from their pedal board and just have them go from guitar straight into amp. If it is clean from the amp, straight from the guitar straight to the amp, then somewhere in the pedal board lies the problem with their noise. So then from there, unfortunately, if they have a lot of pedals, you kind of got to start just troubleshooting and pulling individual pedals until you find the culprit, so that's something that's why if you are recording and they have a full pedal board, but they're only using one tone for that, or one effect for that tracking, I would ask them to kindly ask them to pull the pedal out of their pedal board and let's just go straight. Like just use that one pedal, so we're not having the super long chain, and we're not also going through all these different pedals, and it's going to eliminate the least amount of noise that we can get. So that is the overview of tracking electric guitar, thinking about understanding how our guitars work, understanding how our amps work, how you can dial that in, making sure you go find the speakers, where the speakers are in there. Feel free to talk to your artists, ask them about what they think the best speaker they have, because maybe they replaced a speaker in there, maybe they have one, or they know that a speaker is better in there. So just always keep that in mind too, because the musician's going to know his gear pretty well, and that's always something that's going to help. Now, mic-wise, remember, we always want to try to take a DI with guitar whenever possible, because we can always reamp it and use an amp sim or change the tone if we need to. Miking-wise, think about once you do find the speaker, know that dead center is going to be bright and more present. The farther you get away to the edge, the more darker and the less present, so it'll feel a little bit slightly more distant. a really good place to start is where the two cones meet. That just kind of gives you a general overview of what the tone is you're hearing from the amp, and then you can adjust slightly left or right depending on the needs for your session. And then if you do have a pedal board in there, just remember anytime you're taking DI, it has to be the very next thing after the instrument, whether that's bass or guitar or anything that's taken a DI. It's got to go guitar, DI, then amp, or guitar, DI, pedals, and then amp. Because that's the only way you'll ever get a fully clean DI. So hopefully this lesson helps you guys out, everyone here that was watching, in your future sessions. For those of you who have seen some of this before, hopefully this is a review of something if you ever didn't lose anything on that. But think about this when you're recording your guitar next time, about what the actual sound you need is, what you're trying to accomplish, and what kind of tone you need, if it's bright or dark or a little more chill or not. And then always try to take a DI. So thanks everybody for watching. We will be back again tomorrow, so y'all have a great rest of the night, and I will see you then. Later, guys.
Thanks everybody for watching. If you found this content useful, please like this video. It will tell YouTube to show it to others. If you are enrolled, please go to the Seminars tab on the my.trcoa website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. And if you need to book one-on-one time with an instructor, text 512-231-0344. If you aren't enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information about what we do. Also, please post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys on the flip side. Bye, everybody.